So we're going to finish up the operating procedures,
Okay.
and then we'll get started on some of the rules and regulations, the stuff that you just have to memorize.
Okay.
So some of the activity involves talking to satellites, and we kind of call them space stations
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to the International Space Station. Essentially, any amateur satellite that's above the ground is a space station.
Right. Well, something called the international is the ISS, right?
Right.
Okay.
So, as a technician class license holder, you can operate in all of the VHF, UHF, and above bands,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where most of the satellites and space stations operate. They operate kind of like a repeater, only slightly different because they have transponders. So one of the differences is when you talk to a repeater, there's a frequency offset that we talked about, but it's in the same band. It may be 600 kilohertz for VHF or 5 megahertz for UHF. In the case of a satellite, it's a totally different band. So you have these modes called either UV or VU, which stands for the uplink and downlink frequencies for the satellite. So if it's specified as a UV mode, that means that you're using UHF frequencies for the uplink and VHF for the downlink. Likewise, if it's VU, you're using VHF for uplink and UHF for downlink. I mean, they should be fairly clear. Most of the satellites will support single sideband, FM, and CW and data. They usually have telemetry channels that are sending down data.
Call from 13219890507.
Was somebody just talking?
It was my phone.
Oh,
So I guess the first test question is, which amateurs may contact the International Space Station on VHF bands?
Bravo. No? Delta?
I don't remember this at all.
Go back to the previous slide, could you?
I didn't see it on there. Technician class or higher.
Bravo.
Bravo. Now, you can definitely listen to all the channels. Contacting the space station, the International Space Station, is not as simple as you might think, but technically you can do it. So what is meant by the statement a satellite is operating in UV mode?
Uplink and then downlink.
Alpha.
You have to remember what the
No, Bravo.
right. Remember,
No,
70
wait.
centimeters
No, Bravo.
UHF and 2 meters is VHF. What mode of transmission is commonly used by amateur radio satellites?
Delta.
Delta.
Delta. Okay. Satellites have limited power. So there's a problem if you send too strong a signal because the transponder repeats that signal at the same signal strength. It means you would be blocking weaker signals because it's a limited amount of power. So if you're using all the power, you're the only signal that's going to be broadcast. They also have beacons on them, which is just a separate channel or frequency that sends out telemetry information on the status of the satellite. They'll do things like temperature, battery voltage, various, internal things like that. Plus, you can also see what the beacon's power output is. So when you're actually talking to a satellite, one of the things you can do to verify that you're not overdriving it is to compare your downlink signal with the beacons and see if it's about the same. So what's the impact of using excessive radiated power on a satellite uplink?
I love D.
Bravo.
Yeah.
Which of the following is a way to determine whether your satellite uplink power is neither too low nor too high?
Charlie.
Charlie.
Yep, Charlie. You read faster than I do.
Okay. There are different types of satellites. One of those is called a LEO for low Earth orbit. And they're in the 99 to 1,200 mile range, which means that they rotate around the Earth pretty fast, somewhere in 88 to 127 minutes to do an orbit. They tend to be very high bandwidth satellites, and they have a low time lag for when you're communicating. So what is a LEO satellite?
Hello, Delta.
Delta.
Okay, I mentioned that the satellites have beacons which send out telemetry. Actually, in most cases, they send it as Morse code. And it just does a block of health and status information, kind of things I talked about, the battery voltage, currents, satellite temperature, things like that. Anybody can listen to a satellite beacon if it's a non-military satellite. Here's a little chart that shows some of the uplink and downlink frequencies for a few satellites that have these XW2A, Alpha, 2 Baker, Charlie. And you can see that the uplink frequency on these is in the UHF band, and the downlink frequency is in the VHF band, showing you what kind of output power it has for the beacon or for telemetry channels, whether or not it's a linear transponder, which means that it repeats the signal it receives exactly like it receives it. There's also some that have a inverse transponder, which flips the thing around, and they're a little more complicated. As I recall, that's stuff for the general class license. So what is a satellite beacon?
Delta.
Yep, Delta.
What telemetry information is typically transmitted by a satellite beacon? Or
Charlie.
Yep.
Who may receive telemetry from a space station?
Anyone?
Anyone? Alpha?
Yep. Anybody, if you got a radio.
Right.
Okay, there are computer programs. There's probably some for your cell phone. I haven't really looked. That will allow you to track these satellites. And they will give you a global map and show the orbit of the satellite and where it currently is, at least where it thinks it is, because it's done by calculations. It shows you times on the pass, the azimuth, the elevation, things like that. Usually have information about the apogee and perigee. It will show you the apparent frequency and the Doppler shift. Are you familiar with Doppler?
Yes.
Yes.
You know, when a train's coming towards you and it, blows its whistle, you hear the frequency seem to increase and then decrease as it goes away from you. That's Doppler shift. So you have the same thing with a satellite because it's moving relative to you. Actually, I forgot why.
So it's actually, it's not measuring it. I mean, it's not receiving that. It's calculating where the satellite's supposed to be.
The tracking program is calculating this based on information that is provided with.
Yeah.
They use what's called the Keplerian elements, which are published by several sources, and it has all the basic information about all the different satellites. And that's the data that's used in these tracking programs. Because they're not actually receiving data from the satellite.
Right.
It's a calculation. And I mentioned the Keplerian elements. It's just a big text file that has all that information about every satellite. Here's a screenshot of one of the kind of tracking programs, and you can see the paths. And like over here is the International Space Station. And these green circles are showing the footprint because of the curvature of the Earth. Inside that area is where you have direct line of sight with the satellite. So you have to be within those circles in order to transmit or receive to the satellite. And in these programs, you can pick, any particular satellite that you want to monitor, essentially. The red and white dashed line there is what we call the terminator, or the gray line, which is where you go from daylight to dark.
Okay.
It's also something that's important in HF communications because you can get some long distance propagation along the gray line. It obviously doesn't last very long because it's moving, but when it comes by, you have the chance of getting some long distance. So which of the following are provided by satellite tracking programs?
Bravo. Alpha.
Delta?
Delta.
Well, you have to pick one.
Delta.
Delta.
Delta. Which of the following are inputs to a satellite tracking program?
Bravo.
Yeah, named after some old astronomer called Kepler. Okay, so I mentioned Doppler shift, okay, because of the apparent frequency shift due to the relative motion of the satellite and you.
Mhm.
So you or your radio has to compensate for that. So it makes it a little difficult to communicate with a moving satellite because the apparent frequency is changing. So you have to be able to have it either automatically adjusted or be very good at with your tuning knob. Another problem is called spin fading, because most satellites rotate in order to reduce thermal stress, because if they didn't, the side facing the sun would become extremely hot and the side facing away would be extremely cold. So you'd have a lot of thermal stress across it. So they use what's called rotisserie mode, where the satellite rotates so that it kind of evens out the temperature. Well, as a result of that, the antennas on the satellite are also rotating, which means that it's changing the polarization of the antenna. And that causes your signal to essentially fade in and out as the polarization rotates. And that's what we call spin fading. One of the ways that people counteract that is use a crossed antenna, where essentially two antennas on the same boom, and one is set up for horizontal polarization and the other set up for vertical. So it helps eliminate the result of spin fading. So what is Doppler shift in reference to satellite communications?
Charlie.
Charlie. What causes spin fading of satellite signals?
Bravo.
Bravo.
Bravo. Okay, so we learned any technician license or higher can talk to the International Space Station. UV mode represents the UHF uplink and VHF downlink. That's really the only one you have to remember. Most of the satellites support all the modes: single sideband, FM, CW, and data. You shouldn't try to use excess power when you're talking to a satellite, because if they're limited power, you're going to block other users. And you can check your signal strength against the beacon to see whether or not you're too low or too high. LEO stands for low Earth orbit satellites that rotate very fast because they're close to the Earth. Beacons are channels on the satellites that send out health and status information. Can be received by anybody, but like I said, most of them send that information in Morse code. So it can be received by anybody that has a radio and can decode Morse code. The satellite tracking programs show you the calculated real-time position of the satellites over the Earth, display things like time, azimuth, elevation, maximum altitude, which would be apogee, end of the pass, that kind of stuff. Apparent frequency due to Doppler shift, and they require the Keplerian elements as input to the program. And they have to be updated frequently because that information changes. Doppler shift is just the apparent frequency change due to the relative motion. And spin fading is because of the satellite rotating and its antennas are rotating. Any questions on those?
Nope.